So we will get started. It'll be pretty much the same drill as the panel we did before lunch. Wonderful lunch. Where's Betsy? Thank you for the wonderful lunch, Betsy. Very good lunch. Thank you. Thanking you for the lunch. And then we'll segue right from this panel right into our next session with Kim Wyman. I'm going to start off by just quick introductions with our panelists and a few questions, and then, of course, again, same drill. When you have questions for the panel, no questions for me, but questions for the panel, just write them down and get them up to me, and we'll try to take them on. Okay, so today we've got 4 panelists to talk about the role that AI is now playing in political campaigns and in the elections media, and how AI is being used, and maybe also some of the concerns that we have about how AI may be used or be abused in this context. First, we have Jessica Huseman. Jessica, she's great. I've interacted with Jessica in the last election cycle through Votebeat, which many of you may have used or read or followed or been interviewed for or something like that. She helped found Votebeat in 2020. She was previously the lead elections reporter at ProPublica. She teaches data journalism at St. Bonaventure, St. Bonnie's. Go Bonnies. And government transparency courses at American University. We have the 5 Mindys. We have all 5 of them. Many of you know Mindy. Mindy's the writer-editor for electionline.org, the nation's only nonpartisan, non-advocacy clearinghouse for election administration news and information. I do know now we have another competing newsletter from the EAC, apparently, but I know that it's probably a little bit different. Okay,
Complimentary, not
complimentary. Okay, thank you. Not competing, but complimentary. Before joining electionline.org, she was a senior writer for County News, a semi-monthly publication of the National Association of Counties. And prior to that, Mindy was the publications coordinator at the Association of Zoos and Aquariums and features writer for the Terre Haute Tribune-Star. A lot of experience writing in the journalism space. We also have Danielle Cendejas, Danielle at the end, who I have known for a long time as well. Danielle is a partner at the Strategy Group, based back in Pasadena, where we're both from. And she has 20 years of experience working on political campaigns. She joined the firm in 2009 after working on President Barack Obama's campaign. Throughout her career, Danielle has developed messaging and direct mail programs for candidates at pretty much every level of politics. And she's contributed to the success of quite a few election officials back in Southern California, but also nationally. Now, in addition to the campaign work that she does, she's also the board treasurer for the American Association of Political Consultants, and she's been recognized with quite a few awards from that association, and received one of the Reed Awards from Campaigns and Elections. She's from Gonzaga. Those of you who follow basketball, there's a bit of a thing between Danielle and I, because I went to Duke. So, and last but not least, sorry, I'm just getting my notes cleared here. Julie Sweet's with us as well. Julie is the the director of advocacy and industrial relations at the American Association of Political Consultants, where she's led national efforts to advance political free speech protections, ethical standards, and industry innovation. She's a recognized expert on AI and data privacy, and she's been driving bi-policy collaboration at the intersection of technology, democracy, and political communications. She has a huge amount of experience working with Congress, national campaigns, advocacy organizations, and has developed winning strategies on landmark legislation and high-stakes policy fights in many of these areas. So we're really excited to have Julie with us today. Okay, so I'm going to start with Jessica. So make sure your microphone's on. flip that little switch up so that the 5 minutes can hear us. So, from a journalist perspective, you went to school for journalism, and now you're teaching journalism. How did you get involved in covering elections and election administrations, in particular before you founded Votebeat?
Yes. So I was I was a healthcare intern at ProPublica for 7 weeks. I was being paid $700 a week, no benefits. And at the end of the 7 weeks, they said, "We would like you to stay. You can even have health insurance. You have to cover elections now." And I said, "Sounds good." And that was in 2016. And here I am. So that's how I got into it. It was a total accident, but I'm really glad that it happened. And so at ProPublica, I was running electionline, which was our collaborative effort to sort of report out problems at the polls, and that involved hundreds of local newsrooms and was a good success for what it was, but I wanted to take the lessons from it and do something else with it. And so Votebeat was born. And now we're in 5 states.
Tell us about Votebeat. So, what's the origin story, and what's the mission of Votebeat?
Yeah. So in 2020, when I was running electionline for ProPublica, the CEO of then Chalkbeat, now Civic News Company, because it's an umbrella organization, called me. Her name's Elizabeth Green. I just moved into a new house. I was not expecting Elizabeth's call. I did not have her number programmed into my phone. And she said, "Hey, Jessica, it's Elizabeth Green." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "Do you think that I should start a newsroom that covers election administration?" And I said, "The election is in 7 weeks." And she said, "I know, but I think I can do it." And so I said, "Sure, go raise $1 million. And if you come back to me, I'll help you figure it out." And 3 days later, she was like, "I have the money." And which was the most shocking thing I'd ever heard. And so I came on as a consultant, and I trained the reporters that they had, and they had them in 8 states, which were the 5 that we have in addition to Georgia and North Carolina and California. I could be getting that wrong, but anyway, there were 8. There are now 5. And so after 2020, that pop-up went away, and we rebuilt it as a permanent newsroom. And so we're going to keep growing, but we are in Texas and Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin is our newest state.
So, can you also talk just about how you work to build connections at Votebeat? I mean, like how this is how we got connected, for example. So, can you talk just a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So we are all of our stuff is Creative Commons licensed. So anything that we publish, anybody can publish. And we have specific partner publications in each of our 5 states. And so that, and then also just our larger mission sort of means that we do a lot to try to raise all boats. Like we're trying to make voting journalism better, not just like be a voting journalism organization. And so one of the things that we did, for example, last election cycle was the experts desk, and we did a smaller version of this at ProPublica during electionline. But we feel really strongly that like we don't really need to give journalists news tips; they have them. What we need to do is give them good and qualified people to talk to about those tips, because one of the most powerful things that we as like an expert organization can do is tell them, like, actually, that's not a story and you shouldn't write it. And so the best way to do that in mass is sort of like open our Rolodex to everybody. And so we invited 400 experts. Many of you in this room were in that, in the experts desk. I can see you. Thank you. And we invited I said 400 experts, 100 experts, 400 journalists, and all of those conversations were on the record. And so it allowed journalists to come into the Slack group and be like, "Hi, I've been covering the election for 2 weeks. Normally I cover the school district. We have a problem with provisional ballots. Who can talk to me about that?" Because you have to know quite a lot to even get to the point where you know there's a problem with provisional ballots, you know who to ask, and you know who among a list of 100 experts could possibly answer that question. So a room in which everybody could ask everyone was the most efficient solution, and it shockingly worked pretty well. And so we're going to keep doing things like that. And I think that's like a big part of how we build connections at Votebeat is like, we not only build them ourselves, but we try to help make other people make those connections, which sort of just proliferates connections.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great experience in 2024. I really enjoyed being part of that, and if many of you in this room, were a part of that, and know how fun it was. It was a kind of an early warning system for me at least, where you get some journalists covering some county somewhere, and they would just all of a sudden on Slack jump up with a question. You're like, oh, I didn't know that was going on.
And that's actually one of the, when I pitched this as an idea to our CEO, she was like, the experts will never do this. Like, we can't pay them. What do they get out of this? And I'm like, information, data. They want it more than we do. This is a way for them to understand what's going on in this space that they cover so specifically. And I think that we delivered on that. I think that it was minimally pretty fun to do. And I hope that people professionally benefited from it as well.
Yeah, so we'll move on, but I will say one more thing, which was from my perspective, and for folks in the room, what was really useful about having a platform like this is that I also knew who to trust on the journalism side. Right, because many of you the academics in the room know about this. You get a lot of emails from a lot of supposed journalists, and you don't know who's who. So this was really great in terms of we knew these were people we could trust.
Yep.
And they were conversations that were on the record.
And everybody had everybody's contact information.
Exactly.
So everybody knew who they were talking to.
So let's switch to Mindy now. So electionline.org, very different kind of journalism. And I think everybody in the room kind of knows what electionline.org does, but maybe you could give us just a quick, summary about kind of what ElectionLine's mission is.
So my mission is to get up at 4:50 every morning, and I like to say I'm a professional Googler, and I Google so you don't have to. But it's basically doing news clips, which has changed dramatically over the years doing that, and then doing that every day, and then once a week pulling it all together with either a story that I've written or someone else, and then rounding up all the other news and that sort of thing. So when Doug Chapin started it back in 2001, the goal was to be, essentially, which we still say, nonpartisan, non-advocacy, just a clearinghouse for information and news about the election administration. The nonpartisan thing is becoming a little bit more difficult as we move along, so that's basically ElectionLine. I Google so you don't have to.
So I'm shocked that you have to get up that early, because I would have thought that with AI you'd be able to sleep in a little bit, right? Sorry.
Sorry. No, I mean, it's just I have always done the searching, even sort of before this sort of new dawn of AI, because there's just an element of it needs a human set of eyes on it to determine whether it's just a press release or it's an actual news story. And now that ever since when Google got sued, by some of the conservative organizations, because they said that Google was not, their search engine was not providing everything, they sort of changed their algorithm. So now even using that, I will get Facebook posts, even if I list it as news, I'm searching in news, it includes someone's Facebook post in the news search. So it really does take a human touch still to sort of go through it. Me personally, and perhaps this is a bit of a Luddite of me, but I would never be comfortable putting something out that had not had a set of human eyes on it.
So you've been at ElectionLine for probably 2 decades, right? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And so you've been through, it's kind of like many of us in the room, we've lived through this AI revolution. How is it changing the nature of the work that you're doing at electionline.org? Is it improving your ability to discover stories? Is it improving your ability to produce the content that you're producing? How's it changing your workflow?
So for now, not a whole lot, and I'll be honest. I mean, I am not a huge fan of AI. I can tell immediately when something has been written by AI as opposed to a person. It's pretty easy to spot. There's just a different sort of tone and clarity to it that there isn't there if a person has written it. There are some new, the struggle always has been, especially more recently, is what's a legitimate news source and what isn't. Unfortunately, not everyone is Votebeat or ProPublica. So going through that, there is now something new out there, and I've just sort of been diving into it. It's called Citizen Portal AI, and essentially what that does is if there is and I don't know whether everyone is aware of that, it's potentially a good thing. I just would like to sort of know a little bit more about their funders to ensure that it is just this sort of legitimate organization. What they do is if you have a community, a county council meeting, a board of elections meeting, and it's online, it will go through and write the transcript of that. Like immediately, and we'll sort of interpret it. And I think that's got the potential to be a good thing because, first of all, no one wants to sit through any sort of county council, city council, legislative meeting at all ever. And so I think this has the potential to be good, but I need to do some more digging into it before I would feel comfortable putting it forward, because we've worked really hard to do that with our other news sources. I'm very much a big, no Fox News, no MSNBC, and so I wouldn't want to sort of like just take something at its word initially. But so it's sort of trying to make sure that elections officials, who are the bulk of our readers, their time is so compressed. I want to make sure that they're getting good, legitimate, reliable information. But that's got the potential to be helpful because I think, there's a lot that, there's just small local newspapers who do cover city council meetings or county council meetings. Their reporters are also covering 27 different other things, and they don't always have time to go to Board of Elections meetings. So I think this has the potential to sort of be a good thing to get more news out there and give people that opportunity to read it and that sort of thing.
Right, thank you. So earlier this morning in our first session with Commissioner Palmer, the question came up about do election officials and folks in this community writ large talk a lot to campaign consultants and political campaigns? And we had a little bit of a conversation about that. And I think in general the answer is probably not much, because as I was chatting with some of the folks after that session about, as election officials and also academics, we do tend to try to want to stay nonpartisan and kind of above the political fray in the work that we do. It's important for trust. It's important for our neutrality. So a lot of times we don't involve the people who are actually running the campaigns and working directly in campaigns in a lot of these conversations. So that was part of the reason why Betsy and I thought it was really important to invite Julie and Danielle to this conference today. And I really do hope that folks take advantage of their expertise and the advantage to chat with them at some point today. And I'll start with Julie. Can you tell us just a little bit about what the American Association of Political Consultants does?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you all. It's so good to be here amongst all of you. So the American Association of Political Consultants is the only bipartisan professional association of political professionals. And we run the gamut from your pollsters to your direct mail consultants to your digital advertisers, your organizers, your opposition researchers, your fundraisers to your public affairs professionals. Basically, if you're in the business of communicating to voters or constituents about an issue or an idea, there's a good chance that you're a member. The mission of our organization, one is professional association, right? So upskilling, professional development, networking, relationship building, and learning from each other across the aisle. Yes, we are bipartisan intentionally. We have a 50-50 board. And we try to stay out of the politics as much as possible and focus on the trade and the ethics of the profession, because we do take the responsibility and the role that we play in our democracy very, very seriously. One of our main goals is to establish those ethical guidelines and best practices because of the role that we do play in communicating with voters about ideas and things. And then the third thing really is, how do we protect and promote free speech and the tools that empowers that speech, as well as democratic participation, and ensure that we have an informed electorate through access to tools. And so I ran around the country as state legislatures ensuring that AI policy policies or data privacy policies or even your robocall policies that are intended to prevent scams and misinformation and bad actors doesn't inadvertently wrap up political communication and prevent our candidates and our civic organizations from being able to engage people in the political process.
So it's really trying to maintain the freedom of speech, which is very important for campaigns, but also to try to make sure that it's being done so in an ethical way. When we first got introduced, I was, I've known a little bit about the American Association of Political Consultants, but I wasn't aware of the research and the amount of data actually that you've collected, and it's pretty remarkable. So, can you talk just quickly about the some of the work that you've done on building ethics policies with association to the use of AI in campaigns?
Yeah, so what we quickly learned is we sat down and we actually had, Danielle can tell this story better than I because she was in the room. A couple of years ago, we also want to promote innovation and ethical and responsible practices through our awards program. We had an AI generated ad that was up for an award, and there was a quick how are we going to deal with this? And so it really sent the board to try and develop a best practice and a standard and a guideline on the use, which is essentially similar to what the FEC has declared is like, regardless of the tool, deceptive practices are deceptive practices, and they have no place in our democracy and is not something that's protected by free speech with or without a disclaimer. So what the next step was, though, is that we've now got 26 states that now regulate synthetic media, but varying different degrees, all trying to contort themselves around strict scrutiny, right? And most of them use a disclaimer framework that if you put a disclaimer on it, you can't possibly be trying to deceive people because you're telling them up front, hey, this might deceive you. The problem is that some of the early research, as we're trying to develop our guidelines, is early research suggests that there might be a backlash effect, right? That if you label it, and I think one of our panelists actually spoke to this, that even accurate information that is labeled as AI generated won't be trusted by the audiences. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the responsible actors who are going to label their stuff, either one, because we're a credibility-driven industry, and two, because there are damage awards, there are steep fines, there are jail time, there is disqualification in the state of Minnesota. Like the consequences of not doing this right, according to state law, which again varies across all 26 states, is really steep. So you're just going to be like, hey, I want to avoid that risk and I'm going to put a label on it. But what does that mean when the audience actually sees it is that they're not going to trust the content. And the other flip side is that the bad actors don't really care whether they have a disclaimer or not. So if we get to the point where people aren't trusting the stuff that's labeled, and then the bad actors are not labeling the deceptive content, which one are the audiences going to believe? So given all of this, we're like, we actually need to understand what these disclaimers are doing. So our foundation, which is our sister C3 organization, is investing in some research, practitioner-led, bipartisan, to really test the kind of real-world consequences of this disclaimer. And this is kind of born out of the need that we did doing studying the adoption habits of our members in the 2024 election. And we've got big questions about what these ethical guardrails are. There's a lot of people who want to defer to disclaimers because that's kind of the world that we exist in, right? Say who the donors are, saying who's paying for it, stand by your ad. But do those kinds of disclaimers translate in the same way? And we just really need to understand that better and have more informed policy making before it starts impacting people's speech.
Great, thank you. I just heard an excellent research question for academics in the room, especially.
I got a bunch more for you, so come talk to me.
So, excellent research question right there. But Danielle, so is there some more to this story that you wanted to tell? Sound like there's a little bit of a backstory here about being in the room.
Sure. So I'm on the ethics committee. I'm one of the co-chairs of the ethics committee for the American Association of Political Consultants. Yes, we have one, which is very exciting. And part of what we do is people will send complaints about someone doing something bad in the industry, and we don't really give a judgment. We sort of give a suggestion on like, hey, this is out of bounds, or and this is like borderline, or this is we're being weaponized to try to be used in a campaign. So we make these judgment calls every once in a while. But during award season, the winners that have we are self judges. So other members of AAPC are judging the content, so it's all done by practitioners, and we ask if, do you believe that this has followed the ethical guidelines of the AAPC? And when something gets flagged and it's up for an award because it scores well, we, as the ethics committee, have a review. And so when we were reviewing this particular ad, it was done by an independent expenditure, so they couldn't have any connection to the candidate. The candidate was shown to be the interviewee of somebody who was across the desk interviewing them. And it was, really just, the lady was asking the candidate questions. He was kind of like, I don't know, and like kind of being shown to be incompetent. And there was a tiny little disclaimer that flashed on the screen for like 2 seconds, and it was like, yeah, this was AI generated, and we were like, what the heck is this? And it's rare that all of us are alarmed at the same time on the ethics committee. It's a really well-established group of people, and we're very, very thoughtful. But we were all horrified, and we were like, if this is what's the future of consulting, where we don't even need to do shoots anymore, we don't even need to have it's believable that candidate sat for that interview even though it's paid for by a super PAC, and you would have to have a very sophisticated knowledge of campaign finance in order to really understand that. We're like, this is actually something we should flag for the board, and that turned into our ethics committee drafting the policy that we have on our website on these ethical guidelines on what is deep fakes and out of bounds, and what is satire and inbounds. And so when we brought it to the board, we showed them that video, and everyone was horrified. And it is rare that we get a bipartisan agreement on something in our board without really kind of having a discussion on whether this is that this will benefit one side or the other. But it was pretty unanimous that this is an instance that could happen to any candidate. It can happen to one of our clients. And how do you fight back from that? Because once something has hundreds of thousands of dollars, in this case, it was a smaller school board race of advertising, but there are also millions and millions of dollars going on broadcast television all across the United States, and you can't claw that back. It doesn't matter how many press releases you send out.
Great, thanks for that story. How has AI changed what you do at the strategy group?
I'm a probably 3 or 4 month adopter. Julie mentioned that there was a study done by the AAPC about consultants' use of AI technology, and I sat through I did the survey, and I sat through the interview, and I told the interviewer, I was like, I don't know, man, this stuff scares me. And I'm like, I really do not know what it is that I feel like I need to learn a whole nother language. And I go, and I've used Grammarly because we do direct mail, and the last thing you want is a typo to go out before something, and humanize when you were editing 50 mail pieces a week, and you always miss something. So I've been using Grammarly for a very, very long time just to edit things and to write within it and streamline my my editing process. But after the Polly's contest, we had at our conference probably a number of panels on AI technology and the various things that are going into it. So I started kind of, where do I go when I want to actually learn something? I go to my university and I will go to their website, and I'm like, oh, Gonzaga's got a certification program with the Center for Lifelong Learning, and they have an AI prompting class, and it's 5 weeks, and I get an alumni discount. Great, let me do that. And just taking that class for 6 weeks just changed my perspective. I was like, oh, we actually can use this to expedite the amount of grunt work that we do for a political campaign. When we're working with a client, we are oftentimes functioning as their campaign manager, we're functioning as their communications director, we're functioning as their political director. I'm functioning as their political therapist, unlicensed, and so no one report me. But there's a lot of different little things that we're managing. Whether it's I want to say something on this thing that happened in the world, and I need a social media post about it, and all of that just takes a ton of time from us. And the biggest time suck that we have right now is we're filling out ungodly amount of candidate questionnaires on issues ranging from budget crises to AI technology to anti-automation at the ports and all sorts of other things. And our candidates don't have time to learn all of these things, and we don't have time to write this times 6 other clients that we have going on at the same time. So what I learned from my AI class was actually we can create custom GPTs for every single candidate. We can take their biographies, we can take their policy positions, we can take other research that has been put on them and actually teach this thing to learn about its issue sets. And then we can put the prompts in there of the questionnaire answers and say, what would this candidate say about nurse to patient ratios? And so the candidate who is an ER nurse has a very different answer than the candidate who is overseeing healthcare from an operations to one who has no experience in healthcare. And so we're able to really tailor these things, but a process that would have taken us probably 2 weeks to write one questionnaire because they come with like 40 different questions, we're able to do within like a couple hours. And then we're able to just go through and edit it and just make sure it doesn't say the same thing over and over again, or that we're really kind of putting a little thought and energy into questions that kind of matter. So those types of things, we're just speeding up the process on it. But I have done what we did with every one of our candidates this summer is we had a strategy session, and I put their bio into both ChatGPT and Claude, and I gave it a prompt and said, this is where they're running. Here are the communities that they are running in. Can you give me 3 things? Can you give me a shorter bio that would resonate with these particular audiences in these particular areas? And can you give me creative meet and greet ideas that are not your typical house party that resonate with this community? And so the one that it gave me for Christian and I were talking earlier about Northeast LA was very different than the district that's over by the beach that gave me completely different cultural things. The one in East LA was like, have an open mic night for the comedians because there's a lot of artists who like live in this community, and over by the beach you might want to do a beach cleanup or a nature walk because there's nice little hilly areas that you can go to. And so it really kind of drilled down and gave me the idea, and I was talking to one of our good friend David Binder about this, is that if your candidate can't afford polling and they can't afford to figure out, like, can I spend $40,000 to get a survey? Like, this is one way that we can at least get insights in real time to be able to tailor the messaging that we want to, and make sure we're resonating within, the community that we're doing it. So those are some of the types of things that we're exploring with my newfound knowledge, thanks to Gonzaga
3-month
University.
knowledge, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit further, though, about AI-generated content, in particular political and electoral content. So Mindy, do you stumble upon a lot of AI-generated content, and what do you do with it? What do you do about it? Does it concern you?
Sure, and actually, I just piggybacks a little bit on the discussion about the disclaimers. So far, and Jessica, you can chime in. I don't know whether Votebeat is doing this or not, but Gannett seems to be the only one that I've noticed that if AI has assisted a reporter in writing something, they list it right up at the byline, which is, I don't know, as a former reporter, that just seems, I mean, it's full disclosure, but it just seems a little bizarre to me. But so Gannett is the only one that I've really noticed doing that. And because Gannett is a reliable media outlet, I would obviously still post that, even though AI had assisted the reporter in writing that story. If it's again, and it depends upon where they put it. I do my best to only rely on reliable media sources. So you're going to be less likely to get completely AI generated stuff from those. And then it's just a case by case basis. I don't necessarily post it that morning, and I would go back and look at it and decide whether it was something that I felt was still trustworthy. It's very fascinating to do the Google searches every morning, because even though I really narrow it down to only use Google News and I do a certain time frame, it always wants to push me to whatever Google's AI search is, and I'm always like, no. And so, but that's been interesting, and that's been a little bit of a frustration. But like I said, and Jessica, you can chime in about, I don't know what Votebeat does any disclaimers, or you guys are not even using it at all as far as your stories go and that sort of thing.
I find, I'm going to answer this question with the disclaimer that I think when a journalist is and isn't using AI is and has been for years such a weird gray area that I'm not sure at what point, I don't know if there's an industry understood common definition of at what where the bright line is in terms of you have used it so much that you need to disclose it. And I think the conversation has really centered around like the literal writing of the thing, right? Like the generation of the words themselves, but obviously you can use AI for a lot more than that, right? Like I have not done a VLOOKUP in Excel in a year and a half, and I am not ashamed to admit it, but I have not disclosed that in a single story, right? Like, is that correct ethically? I don't know. I can validate the math, right? Like, but I'm not disclosing it. We do have a pretty robust AI policy that dictates how we can and cannot use AI in the newsroom that our reporters have to stick to, and that it's pretty obvious to tell if they're not. Like the benefit of reading somebody's writing all day long is knowing immediately when they didn't write it. And so, you know, I think from that perspective, it makes it a little bit easier for editors in their own newsroom, but that's how we deal with it.
But as you're researching stories, and I think this also Mindy too, I'd love to hear your comments about this. You must stumble into material that you think is AI generated.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
First off, how do you know that it's AI generated? And second of all, what do you do? I mean, do you use it? Do you ignore it?
I mean, damn. You know, I don't know, and I wish I did, because I'm even struggling with I teach journalism, and I'm struggling with this with my students who I do not see on a daily basis and who I do not communicate with a lot, and whose communications with me can often be really stilted. You know, like the way that you email and the tone that you use when you email is fundamentally different than the tone that you use when you're writing and submitting a paper. And so it can be very difficult to sort of like consistently enforce, you wrote this, you didn't write this. And sure, there are these scanning things, but they're not that reliable, right? Like you can use AI to be like, all right, rewrite this, rewrite it again, rewrite, like you can kind of like take it all out in the wash. And so I think for me, what I'm looking for is just consistent information accuracy. And I think that that's all I can really hold myself accountable for in terms of what I'm choosing to, like the information I'm choosing to share. So, but this has always been the case, right? Like I'm not going to put anything in my journalism that I can't independently verify. That's the same thing here. So, you know, I think the same principles of ethics with like some tweaks and some advancements for this specific technology, you know, they remain the same.
Mindy, comment on that?
Right, and I would agree with Jessica about the independently verifying. It's like if I see something and I was like, that's interesting, but if I can't find it anywhere else, I'm like, I just, you know, and I have the luxury of not being, you know, breaking news, so to speak. So sometimes stuff like that can hold for a day or two. If I can't find it somewhere else, I mean, and I will go through all sorts of things sometimes to find things. You know, county websites, is there a press release on there about the, you know, that sort of thing. So I really do try and find things. But if I can't find any sort of, if it's a questionable source and I can't find a second source on it, I'll hold it. And I do, you know, I keep the link and I keep looking for it. And I will hold it until I can find something that backs it up. It's just, but they're easy to spot. I mean, again, you know, we're working mostly in, and been doing this since I was in kindergarten, because it's been 20 years. So I've been, you know what to look for and what not to, you know, what to see in media sources. So there's definitely more of that coming up now. And, you know, I do worry we are a conspiracy theorist world that we live in now. I mean, we're all seeing this right now in California with the holes in the ballot envelopes. And which is something that people have been doing for years. So I do worry about AI's sort of participation in that sort of thing, and then like putting out bad information to voters. And if you're a young journalist, are you going to rely on that as well? And I think that's where the concerns come in for me, is people not being able to find a second source on things.
Great. So I'm going to switch topics just quickly because we don't have a lot of time. Because I wanted to ask Julie a little bit about data privacy, because I know one of the things that you are an expert in is AI and data privacy. So can you connect the dots for us between AI and data privacy?
Yeah, so I would fall over in my chair. I'm so excited by the question. For us, it's like a question of artificial intelligence, data, and essentially political communication and free speech, right? Because what is it? Data is the new oil, or is it compute power is the new oil, or energy is the new oil? I don't know. But data really does run and power all of these AI systems. But even before AI, the ability to understand people, the ability to find them, and the ability to communicate to them in a way that is meaningful and relevant, that engages them, is really crucial to really to democratic participation, right? People are going to zone out if they're not interested in the election. They're like, all of this stuff that's on the news at night, on the broadcast television, I don't care about any of that. But the art of what Danielle does, right? The art of what our advertisers do is really try to understand, and much to the point of the ChatGPT inquiries, is like, what is going to be meaningful and relevant to the voters that we're trying to talk to? What's going to bring them into the political process beyond just a question of what's going to persuade them to vote X versus Y? But like, so much of what we have to do is how do we keep people engaged and coming back to vote each year? How do we make them care? Or how do we let them know we care about the things that they care about? But the only way to really be able to do that at scale is through data. And what happens is that so many of these data privacy laws, as they attempt to like give people ownership and control through consumer rights of their personal data, these hyper sensitive data definitions that they're creating, because there is legitimate fear that data can be misused for manipulation and for scams and for everything else. But at the same time, much like AI, it can be used for bad, but it is also a really critical tool for not only democratic participation, but for free speech, because the way that the world is going, and we all know this, is people don't tune in to the nightly news. The way that you find people in the public square, if you will, is broken into a gazillion pieces. And the only way to find people in this new public square is by their data. And that's how we find people, that's how we reach people. And so when you constrict political access and political campaigns from using data, that essentially cuts off our ability to engage people in the new public square.
Great, thank you. And we have just 2 minutes. So I wanted to ask Danielle real quickly. I know we could probably have an entire conversation about this, but so political campaigns, they're very competitive, especially the ones you work in. Their time scale is very compressed. Is there something about AI that worries you in the context of, say, like some of the campaigns that you're running around? Do you worry that your opponents are going to weaponize it against you? How do you worry about the uses that or the abuses in the context of your day job?
For sure. I think the first piece is that we have to learn how to make our candidates searchable by these AI tools. And that means really learning on what needs to be on their websites, how many places do we have to publish them, do we need to one of the things that we're doing now is creating content so that we can start doing a Substack series so that we can take some of what our candidate discovery into multiple different places. So we have to really think through what positive information can we say about our candidate to make it searchable online, not just by search engines, but now it's an AI optimization tool, which is something that we barely were worrying about search engine optimization just a few decades ago. Now we're like, oh, this is, now all of a sudden I have to learn that, because you have to constantly keep up with the SEO piece of this. And do you spend money to do it or do you not? Now you have to make it all discoverable by several AI different tools, and what works for OpenAI versus Anthropic and all of these other things that we keep learning about. How do you do that? My biggest fear is that the biggest issue in a political campaign is, are you owning your story, or is somebody defining who you are before you have the chance to own your own story? And that can be weaponized against you by somebody putting up a campaign website that mimics your candidate, that steals their DanielleCendejas.org and diverts all sorts of information that's bad, and now that becomes searchable by AI tools. And that's something that we have to be far more mindful of, that we just really didn't think it through before, and so that's one thing where I think like the folks when you're running a negative ad, it's not just like sending a mailer in the mail. There's a whole online infrastructure that you can do to make that searchable, and we have to be more mindful about that, and that takes staff to actually do the monitoring to figure out how to put yourself in all of these different places. And so while it does speed up a lot of our operations, it also makes us look for those technical skills that we need in order to bring people on board to do that work.
That's great. That's a perfect way to end the panel. Now, before we thank our panelists, I realized I misspoke. We are going to transition right now to our research panel. Okay, so we'll let our guests go. Thank them, please. It was a wonderful session.